Welcome to Operation Healthcare Choice weekly Ask the Expert video series posted every Wednesday. We're here today with Jim Capretta, who is a former OMB Director for Healthcare Programs, and he's currently talking to us in his role as a scholar at the Center for Ethics and Public Policy. Today's conversation is focused on the medical loss ratio, something that came to prominence last week in conversation. Can you provide a background on the issue for us, Jim?
Sure. The medical loss ratio is an insurance concept that was originally put in place, I don't even know how many years ago, but designed to make sure insurers had enough money going out or enough money set aside to pay claims for actual medical benefits. It was sort of a solvency kind of a requirement. And the basic concept is that if you set it at, let's say, 80%, that means that of all the premiums they collect, 80% are required to go back out to pay medical claims. That's the rough concept.
Okay. And so what does this happen? What does this do to the regulatory environment?
Well, I mean, what's happened in the last week or two, actually more like 2 months, is that the entire process has become very clear how important this definition has become. First of all, they put it into federal statute, which has never been done before. It's now the law of the land nationwide that every insurer in every region and every state of the country has to meet the federal government's new requirements, 80% in the individual and small group market and 85% in the larger employer market. But the question then becomes, instead of deciding who's going to meet who's actually meeting the 80% or 85% requirement locality by locality, they're now writing a regulation for the nationwide standard, and you have to define what constitutes a medical benefit and what constitutes a premium. These are definitional questions. What's in the numerator, what's in the denominator, that have huge implications. The latest example being whether or not the taxes that insurers have to pay on premiums sometimes for their workers, taxation on their profits, whether those taxes should be counted in the denominator. They aren't actually available to be spent because they're going to the government, but some advocates in Congress are saying, contrary to what the law actually says, the law is pretty clear that they shouldn't be counted, but contrary to that, there's some senators in Congress who've written a letter to HHS saying, in effect, hey, those taxes should be counted in the denominator. That would force the insurers to spend even more money on medical claims than the apparent 80% or 85% requirement would do on its face.
And does that have an impact on medical innovation? We've heard a lot about medical innovation. It seems to be the hot topic. How does the medical loss ratio come into play?
Well, I think what we're witnessing here is something a lot of people warned about even as the bill was being debated, which is that when the federal government becomes the decision maker on all elements of healthcare, then it kind of locks into place things as they are today, and the ability to innovate and change is very much stifled. Let me just give you sort of a rough example of this. I mean, if, for instance, in the medical loss ratio, a certain kind of managed care is defined as not a medical benefit, you have all these insurers out there that are going to be getting millions of new customers supposedly covering the uninsured, and we're supposed to be bending the cost curve. What are they going to do to actually bend the cost curve? They're going to have to manage care in ways they've never done before, new, innovative ways. But this regulation is going to lock into place forevermore what kind of managed care constitutes a medical benefit and what kind actually is just administrative costs. The upshot is they're probably going to be squeezing very heavily on the ability of the insurance industry to do any kind of managed care or any kind of innovation at all in the managed care field. I think this is a huge mistake. I mean, we're really just at the beginning of this process, but the federal government is now, through this medical loss ratio definition and all the other regulations that are going to be coming down the pike in the next 2 years, 3 years, is going to be calling all of the shots. And when they do that, politics reigns, economics does not. It's also something subject to a lot of lobbying and special interest pressure. So you're going to get irrational decision making that will have very, very perverse consequences, including dissuading a lot of people from even trying to invest in the health sphere because they know whatever they do is probably going to bump up against this kind of a regulatory regime.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today. We have the featured video series to learn more about this issue. click on this week's featured event, a Galen Institute call on the medical loss ratio. I'm Michael Ramlett. Thanks for joining us, Jim. Take care.